High John the Conqueror is the most iconic figure in Black American folklore, and today on the Hoodoo and Chill podcast, we are discussing everything High John the Conqueror, from his relationship to the John and Master folklore stories, his relationship as a spiritual guide to enslaved Black Americans, as well as why he is a spirit that is specifically for Black Americans, as well as how he is used in the Hoodoo tradition. Good morning and grand rising or grand evening, wherever you may be listening. It is me, Papa Seer, host, narrator, and storyteller of the #1 Hoodoo and spirituality based podcast, the Hoodoo and Chill podcast. And as always, I am so excited to be here. I encourage everyone to like, share, and subscribe so the next time we upload an episode, you get the notification directly to your email and directly to your device. So I want to start off today by talking about High John the Conqueror is an African spirit for Black Americans. For anyone who has never heard the origin story of High John the Conqueror, I would highly suggest picking up Zora Neale Hurston released, I believe in 1943, she published High John the Conqueror, not spelled conqueror, just High John De Conquer. So High John Deconkor, High John De Conquer. She, I believe, published this in 1943. It's a short introduction to the spirit of High John the Conqueror, and honestly my favorite, not just because I love Zora Neale Hurston, I just love the way she put the story together. After collecting information from so many different people, it was put together beautifully. High John the Conqueror was said to have come from Africa, traveling on the winds of sound. I want you all to understand that sound and laughter is very, very important in this story. The whole purpose of John coming to the Americas from Africa was to specifically help the Black Americans who were suffering during the times of transatlantic slavery. It is also said in the legend that John the Conqueror rode the same winds that carried the ships from Africa into the Americas. In Black American folklore, Africa is seen as a land that represents wisdom, old knowledge, power, but most importantly, freedom. Any character that we find that is looked to as a liberator often has some form of heritage or significance or origin story from Africa. High John the Conqueror in Black American folklore is seen as a liberator, a bringer of justice, and as Zora Neale Hurston describes him, as the hope bringer. So it would only make sense that his origin story starts in Africa, which also speaks to the whispers of old tales that were passed down from Africa. In this moment, I want to move away from John the Conqueror and I want to bring up Plantation John. We will go back to John the Conqueror and I will tell the full tale. It is important to bring up Plantation John, especially in today's age, because we often mix the two. We confuse the two, or we incorrectly refer to them interchangeably. What I'm saying is that many of the stories that we know today, what we assume to be John the Conqueror, sometimes are stories of Plantation John. And while they too share the same origin of archetype, they are not the same. And there's a big significant difference between the two of them, which I want to touch on today, as well as tell the story of High John the Conqueror. Plantation John is different from the spirit High John the Conqueror. Plantation John is not a spirit. Plantation John is a character who represents a real person and embodies sort of a Black American version of a jester, trickster, spirit, persona, all wrapped up into one, but this is an actual real person. And what I think is important here to recognize is the intention of these two Johns. The first intention of John the Conqueror, this is a mythical spirit of the supernatural who is associated with justice and hope and deliverance. Plantation John is not a spirit. Plantation John represents a real person. The intention of Plantation John is to bring about humor, to make light of a horrible situation, which is also another form of resilience. Again, I always talk about the resilience of Black people. I just think that we can find power out of anything. Both very, very powerful, but they serve their own purpose. Plantation John was there to make humor out of the horrors of their everyday life, something to smile about, something to crack a joke about, something to put a smile on your face. And I love the John and Master stories. I mean, sometimes, yes, it can definitely be triggering some of the words that are used in the stories, but they're really funny. How I could see someone maybe sharing these stories with the children or going about a day's work just to make a chuckle or a smile to get through the day's work, to just offer some type of resilience in the form of laughter to people during that time. The stories of Plantation John are reflections of the lived experiences of our ancestors. They portray the dynamics between our ancestors who were forced to be enslaved and their owners. In these stories, Plantation John, is always the protagonist. All of these stories revolve around conflict, which is often told in a very, very humorous way. Now, of course, many people have connected the stories of Plantation John and Master to John taking on attributes from African trickster figures like Anansi, the spider, or the Yoruba deity Eshu, which I do believe that very much those attributes do exist, but I think they are attributes of many different deities that come from the land of Africa. So again, these are very good stories, very entertaining, and they serve their purpose as a form of resilience through humor. But Plantation John, again, is not the same as High John the Conqueror, nor does he serve the same intention. Some people argue that Plantation John and John the Conqueror are not connected in any way, that they hail from distinct traditions because their intentions are so different. I like to think differently. I do believe that these two are connected intricately in a way. Plantation John is a branch, or even, I dare to say, a watered down version of High John the Conqueror. Let us shift our focus back to the story of High John the Conqueror. High John started off as a whisper. Hey everyone, welcome back to Papa Seer's YouTube channel. If you love diving into captivating stories about Hoodoo history, Black American spirituality, and so much more, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you always know whenever I post a new video. I'll give you a moment right now to go ahead and hit like and also subscribe. Making videos for these amazing stories takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So if you'd love to support my work, please consider donating by using the Super Thanks button or one of the donation links in the video description. Your support helps grow the channel and also gives me the time and flexibility to continue bringing these fascinating stories. Now, let's get back to the video. He was a spirit that took on the flesh of a man. He was a spirit that was said to have traveled the waves of sound And the same winds that carried the Africans to the Americas, High John the Conqueror traveled on those same winds to come to the land of America. The spirit of High John the Conqueror was said to have brought music and laughter on the plantation. We have to remember that his chosen form was a man who worked on a plantation. High John the Conqueror also had the ability of fast travel. He worked on all the plantations according to how the story goes. It wasn't just one particular one. He basically worked on all of them. He was always there. As long as slavery existed, he was always there on the plantations helping the people there. It was said that his presence was like a drum beat. It was a sound that wasn't something you danced to, but they said it was like a drum beat of life. It was a drum beat that kept the people going. It was a drum beat that gave them strength and endurance as they worked tirelessly. High John was said to have an infectious laugh. He loved to sing. He loved dancing. He loved when the people on the plantation would sing and come together. There are stories about him garnishing them instruments as well. It was said that when High John came to these lands, he showed the people here that in the future, slavery was going to end and that one day their ancestors were going to be free, that people were going to be liberated. This vision that he gave them, it was one of the powers that inspired hope into the people for their everyday life. I do want to take a moment here to profile this spirit, because we have to remember that every spirit has their own limitations, their own characteristics, and their own makeup. And High John, while his name is High John the Conqueror, he was a trickster spirit. He was not a spirit of war. He was a spirit of intellect. And I don't think that people give him enough credit for the intellect that he had that coincides with those stories, how he was able to talk his way out of situations, how he was able to quickly navigate through problems, how he was very, very quick-witted. Okay, he was not someone that was stupid. Oftentimes, he played stupid to outsmart the master. Okay, so he wasn't this spirit of war and fire and rebellion. He was very much a spirit of intellect, and he seemed to act more sort of like a spirit guide who was there to assist the people on the plantations with their everyday needs, everyday necessities, be of aid in some way to make their lives just a little bit easier in any possible way that he can. A spirit of wit and intellect on how to outsmart things. In the early times of slavery, he was also a spirit that was taken very, very serious because he was seen as someone who would eventually liberate them from enslavement and oppression as well. Many stories that you hear about Brother Rabbit, those are actually stories about High John the Conqueror. The power of High John the Conqueror was shrouded in his secrecy. This was a spirit, this was a figure that wasn't talked about with, to, or amongst white people during those times. It was supposed to be a spirit specifically, solely, and only for Black Americans during that time, which I will touch more on later on in this podcast. But back to the story, it was said that white people were not able to understand High John the Conqueror. They wouldn't even have known if he was in their presence. He specifically was not for them. He was for people who were in a very, very hard situation. And he specifically came from Africa to America to help enslaved Black Americans. So it was said in his legends that he was not for white people, nor could they understand him or make awareness when he was in their presence. There was no definitive image, photo, or portrayal of High John the Conqueror. Again, he was a spirit who took the form of a man on a plantation, so his look could have varied. Many depictions of High John the Conqueror are always reminiscent of like a John Henry kind of figure, this tall, strong, muscular black man who looks like he's a conqueror. So the depictions of him vary. But I do think, it's something to think about to kind of only box him in this category of being depicted as, this tall, muscular man. I get it, the name the Conqueror, but again, this spirit was more so about conquering things with your mind, how to outsmart and how to outwit things. So it does make sense to depict him maybe as someone shorter, not muscular, to depict how he had to use brain over brawn. Just something to think about. Again, I'm not stuck on his depiction. I think that may vary, or potentially, as many trickster spirits are, they have the power to shapeshift. High John the Conqueror could materialize himself in many different forms in our lives. I mean, again, this is still a spirit that we are talking about. His name meant power. High John the Conqueror, it was a feeling, it was a name that represented power, being able to overcome the impossible. When freedom was given to the enslaved populace in the Americas, the stories and the belief in High John dwindled significantly. This didn't upset High John at all. Again, this is a part of the story. He came here for a purpose, which was help, assist with daily life on plantations, and to get the people here free, the Black Americans. He knew that once he accomplished his goal, that his popularity or his notoriety would dwindle with that. So he wasn't upset about it. What he did was he implanted his home, his power, his essence into the High John root. That would forever be his dwelling here in the Americas. And that anyone who held that root and dressed it with perfume and kept it on them or kept it in a secret place, that was a way to summon his spirit. That the spirit of High John will never forsake the weak and the helpless, nor will it fail to bring hope to the helpless. So here we have two figures. We have Plantation John and we have High John the Conqueror. And to be blunt, I truly believe that the story of High John the Conqueror, the importance of this figure has truly been watered down in one of the biggest ways. When this was a form of spiritual resistance utilized as a way, and also a coping mechanism to deal with the horrors of everyday life of our ancestors. I'll get more into that too in a second, right? But let's back up for a second. Here we have, and I believe that the story, the legend of High John, not even the legend, but the folklore surrounding the spirit of High John the Conqueror, this existed first before Plantation John. This is what I believe. This is what my spirit is telling me, that this was first. Our ancestors formed a belief around this spirit that would liberate them. But let's not just look at the main picture here of liberation from slavery, because I think that can take away from even a greater aspect here too, that this was a spirit that was active in daily life on the plantation. No one talks about that. The good luck spirit that is alive daily on the plantation. And when I say that this spirit has been etched into an early belief system among enslaved Black Americans, you have to think about what this belief could potentially inspire internally for a human being. You think about things like rebellion. We walk with the spirit of John the Conqueror, so now we're going to rebel, or even running away with the spirit or the charm of John the Conqueror, who's going to make sure that you're able to escape with success. When I say these things, it's actually very profound when you think about all of the little details of inspiration that lie within this belief in High John the Conqueror. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that anyone even attempting to work with this spirit or even possess the root from a sacred standpoint must first understand that this is much bigger than you, that you are not just approaching the spirit of the root, you are approaching a spirit that transcends your existence, and a spirit with immense capabilities, because so many people poured their belief into this spirit. It still exists. High John the Conqueror is still very much alive. I just think that for many people, they have been unsuccessful in their attempt to truly have a relationship with this spirit, or even the wrong people, which I will get into later. And they're not approaching this spirit with the respect that he deserves. If Black Americans, specifically from a Black American cultural standpoint, had any version of said spirit or deity that represented a trickster who was also a waymaker outside of what some people might even say Jesus, I would definitely have to give it to High John the Conqueror, because outside of the capabilities of spirit guide, okay, because if you know anything about a spirit guide is there to just simply guide you, not materialize. The spirit of High John the Conqueror is believed to materialize, like things will actually happen in material form in your life from belief in working with this spirit. So it is beyond a spirit guide, okay? All right, this is something real that people really believed in, and still very much so believe in to this day. There's no easy way to walk into saying this other than this, in my opinion, in my very strong opinion, this is a spirit that is only for Black Americans. High John the Conqueror is in that category where this is a spirit that was manifest and materialize solely for the plight and for the assistance of Black people. If you are utilizing the root for your own cultural or medicinal purposes, that's your own business. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about, because outside of the root being utilized in traditional Black American practices, it is also utilized in indigenous practices as well. So I'm not saying that only Black people have the right to work with the root High John the Conqueror in the spiritual sense. No, I'm talking about the spirit that is said to believe to live inside of the root. It's the intention of what you're doing that is the catalyst of everything, especially when it comes to anything ritual or spiritual. Your intention is always the catalyst of that. So no, I only believe that this is for Black American people because there's evidence of that this was a spirit who specifically came from Africa here to assist people out who were Black on the plantations. Now there could even be this argument. Now, this is where I might play a little devil's advocate right here. Now, there could be this argument that High John the Conqueror was only or probably worked a lot stronger for people who experience that hardship. I actually believe that. Not the part where we can't, as the descendants can't work with the spirit of High John. I do believe that our ancestors had a much deeper access to this spirit than we ever will have. And I think that we just have to understand that and might have to just swallow that, as much as we might love or want to love the spirit of High John the Conqueror. But when I think about it, I mean, it's only right when you really think about it, because we don't share the same experience. We will never go through that again. From the legend, the way the legend tells it, this, High John came here specifically for our ancestors. Because that was their lived experience, they're going to share a different type of intimacy with the belief in High John the Conqueror, as well as the effect of working with that spirit, I believe, than we do. I believe that High John will still work for us, but maybe not as powerful as some of the things that it might have done for our ancestors. But hey, that's just the belief that I have. Again, if you don't agree with that, you are more than welcome to grill me in the comments. I love to read it. It's one of my favorite things to do is read the comments. So please, let's talk about it if you have an opposing view, or even if you agree with me. I love it when you all agree with me too. I don't, I never put my hand over anybody's mouth when it comes to the comments. Say how you feel. Just be respectful, right? I know for a fact that some people who are in my audience of Caucasians are not going to agree with what I'm saying right now. And that's fine too. But, I do want to say this, like, this is, again, one of those spirits that's just not for you all. And how a spirit that was here for enslaved Black Americans, how that spirit got etched into the spiritual practices of a Caucasian person. I don't understand that. Maybe someone also in the comments could explain to me how that could be so. So again, for those of you all that are listening, the products that you buy, they are going to work. So again, if someone makes you a High John oil and it works, it works. That's not the same as having an intimacy with this spirit, being able to summon this spirit for his assistance or his help. If that makes sense, like, the trick is going to work because it's designed to work. And as always, I love all my listeners, all demographics of my listeners. And I say these things to my Caucasian listeners to help educate you as to why, when you say things like you are working with the spirit of High John the Conqueror, how it could come off very offensive to one of your Black friends or members of your spiritual house or group, why they might be very offended hearing a white identifying person say those things, especially if they are a person who listens to this podcast and they know the history behind these spirits. So I think it's important for all of us, and this is not just for, my Caucasian listeners, for everyone at this point now, that it's important for you to know the history of something or to know the depths of something before you just jump into it, or because you might have watched a few seconds about something on TikTok. And this is why I make long videos like this. Sometimes I might ramble on a topic, but one thing that I want to be credited for is I want to be very thorough with all of you that are my listeners, because for some of you, I am like a teacher for you. Some of you may not have access, or, you might not be in a place where having someone to mentor you in the realm of hoodooism is applicable to your life. So you listen to podcasts like this, you listen to people like me, and we serve as stand-in teachers until spirit provides you with what you need. So one thing about me is I always want to be very thorough, so that if you were to say that you got this information from Papa Seer, you got it in a nice package with everything that you needed inside of it. Okay. So again, even for those of us that look like each other, we have to approach this spirit with a lot of respect. You have to look beyond this is just some amulet or some trinket. You are tapping into a belief system that's in your bloodline, and a belief system that was transcending before your birth. This was around before you. This predates you. This is going to be around. It's not just an amulet or a trinket. Again, this is a very powerful and sacred belief system. And I think For those of you who may have attempted to form intimacy with the spirit of High John the Conqueror and failed, maybe revisit that relationship from this place of, when I hold this root or when I possess this root, inside of this root lives a piece of the spirit of High John. When you purchase the root, purchase it with that type of intimacy and with that type of intent, that you're not just buying, a pound or however High John roots, but you are purchasing a vessel that holds a very, very powerful spirit. You are holding something sacred that was a piece of Black American history and still is to this day. I think if we were to revisit it with that type of respect, some of you who may have had poor results in the past, you might find that things are going to change for you. And those of you who might have a relationship now, maybe just incorporate this into your belief system and see how much more or how greater the results or how much more intimacy can be gained from that relationship with High John the Conqueror. And for those of you who may not be Black American, and again, this is just my opinion, I can't stop you from doing anything, but I'm standing on my opinion. Even though I still feel like this is not a spirit for you, there's nothing wrong with learning the history of something so that you can also be utilized as a vessel to offer education to your demographic, or to walk with the knowledge of something that you might be particularly interested in. I mean, you're not listening to this podcast for no reason. So, I try my best to be for whoever I need to be for in this moment, while still standing and holding true to the things that I believe on. As with anything in the Hoodoo tradition, there are multiple different methods of doing something. So there are many different ways of working with the spirit of High John the Conqueror, summoning the spirit, or working with the root High John the Conqueror. What I can say is common about each method is the spirit of High John the Conqueror is always summoned with some form of cologne or perfume, or there is an alcohol that is associated with the ritual or the trick that is being fixed. Those are some of the commonalities that each method shares. And of course, I do not offer my own personal methods on air, because that is a space where I like to restrict that access to only my students. So we would have to form a different relationship to have that conversation. But I do like to offer what I can on air within respect to the practice. So I am going to end here, but I do want to offer these closing words that, it is very important for us to hold our traditions and our beliefs sacred. What might seem as something that may be minuscule to you, what might seem as something that just might be a small piece of folklore, could actually be something very important or sacred, not only to our cultural beliefs, but the existence and the preservation of them as well. Those of you that are engaged into this practice, I want you to understand that this is something that's serious. It's not something that you pick up, and it's not something that you put down. It is something that should be implemented into your everyday life, not only in the sense of ritual or even just your intimacy with God or your ancestors, spirit, what have you. No, but also in the respect and the preservation of your own culture, to tell these stories the way that they are supposed to be told, to make sure that they stay alive, to arm yourself with the knowledge of something that you want to engage in. Okay, if you want to get something back from this, I think one of the best things that you can put into this is the effort of preservation of not only of these stories, but the respect, right? The level of respect that is shown to these beliefs that really did mean something and were ways of fighting, coping, and being resilient in a situation that was designed for you never to win. Because there are many people who I believe during those times who would have said, Abraham Lincoln didn't free anyone. It was John the Conqueror doing his job. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on today's subject. As always, families, friends, listeners, and supporters, I send you all off in love, light, peace, prosperity, most importantly, protection. May all of your endeavors manifest in front of your eyes. May everything you touch materialize as if it were gold. May the ancestors and, of course, our loving God offer you nothing but divine experience. And with that, I release you into the atmosphere.